Our guest speaker today is David Bohr. He's a sports writer and a local resident that writes novels that take place in central Pennsylvania. So welcome, David.
See, I made that easy on you.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is David Bohr. I live in Palmyra. I grew up in Anvil. I'm a graduate of Anvil-Cleona High School and of Lebanon Valley College. As you can see at the table, I've got 2 novels I've published in the last few years. And this all started with my work as a sports writer. I was a sports writer for the Harrisburg Patriot News and or PennLive.com for 17 years. And after stepping down from there, I've done freelance work for the Lancaster paper, Lebanon paper, Carlisle paper, and even some work for the Pittsburgh Tribune and for the Providence Journal up in Rhode Island. But it was during the last few years I was at the Harrisburg Patriot, 2014, 2015, 2016, that I started to come up with an idea, originally meant for the teams I was covering. I covered a lot of high school baseball, twilight baseball, Legion baseball, and it's really always been my favorite sport anyway. And I was trying to think of a way to tell a team's story in a different way. Not the basic, this was the game last night, this was the final score, here's who had the game-winning hit, here's how the pitcher did. I was trying to think of a way of following a season just through the eyes of one particular player. Didn't have to be a star, but following through the eyes of one player. And I thought, that's a little too narrow. What if I followed the beginning of the season through the eyes of the pitcher, and then the middle of the season through the eyes of the center fielder, and then the end of the season through the eyes of the catcher? I didn't do any of this while I was with the Patriot, but the idea kind of stuck in my mind. And when I was making hour and a half long drives to places like Boyertown to cover the state championships, my mind had some chance to wander and kind of develop what this story would look like. So instead of applying it to a real team, I created my own fictitious summer league team in my mind. And it became a story about a team in something like Legion or Twilight baseball that was trying to make the national tournament. And the reader would follow it from the point of view of different players throughout. When I stepped down from the Patriot, which I did because I started homeschooling my son for a few years, I had some time to start writing the story. And the story, though it was still a story following a baseball team, also started to develop into a story about what happened to those players off of the field, about their own personal development and growth, about how they find their own life coach to guide them not just to become better players, but to become better men. The story became this: the pride of Central. Note, especially to Lancaster County residents, Central does not mean Mannheim Central. Central is the name of the summer league team. The story, the first half of it or so takes place in Lebanon County. Then the last half of the book splits up between here in Lancaster County, Berks County, and some in the state of Virginia. The story follows a team in their quest to make the national tournament, but also with the challenges they face in life and how they deal with a new person that enters into their circle who becomes their life coach. In addition to being a straightforward story about a baseball team, you can completely read the book like that and enjoy it. It also is written on another level in which all the characters and all of the events that take place in the story are symbolic of people and events in the New Testament. Now, that book came out in 2019, and I wasn't sure I was going to do anything else at that time. It wasn't until The Pride of Central had been out for almost a year that I developed a second idea. This one, I wanted to challenge myself in a few ways. As I said, I've been writing sports now for over 20 years, so writing baseball stories was pretty natural to me. I wanted to write something a little different, So I decided to come up with a half mystery, half romance story. But I wanted the romance to be different from most romance stories. If you read the novels or you watch the movies, they almost always end with the couple getting engaged, getting married, something like that. There weren't many romance stories about a couple that was already married. So I decided to start with a story about a couple who gets married in chapter 1 and follows the romance from there. But I didn't want it to be just about that. This couple is also searching for the family heirlooms on the wife's side of the family. Jewels that were crafted by her father, but her father passed away and they aren't sure where these jewels wound up. I decided to keep it the same to the first book in that it is still in central Pennsylvania. It takes place mostly in Lebanon and Dauphin counties. And whereas the first book, characters are symbolic of specific characters or events are symbolic of specific events in the New Testament, in the second book, I decided instead of making it exactly like the characters in the Bible, this one was going to be characters and events represent concepts. Certain people or events represent forgiveness. Other represent work. Other represent faith. But it's not narrowed down to one specific point. This book became The Jewelry of Grace, which came out early last year. Part romance, part mystery about the jewels. The two books do take place in the same literary universe, but they are not sequels to each other. If you read both, you'll find some overlap, but nothing that makes it impossible to understand the one if you don't read the other. I'm currently working on a third novel. Again, takes place in the same universe. I don't particularly like the term, that's why I keep using the quotes. And will again take place in central PA. But that book's not coming out for another year and a half still. So now that I've given you the overview of the two books, I just wanted to open up the floor to anyone who has any questions about the stories, about the writing process, about the publishing process, why the Phillies are already below 500, any of it. Marty's first.
Can you talk about, give some examples of the tie-in between the New Testament?
Okay, without giving too much away, in the first book, there are exactly 12 players on the baseball team. Among the players is the pitcher named Pete and his brother catcher named Andy. So you can start to piece together who the 12 players are symbolic of. The stranger that comes into their lives is the one who starts to instruct the 12 on how to live and not be so self-centered about what their team is doing and put more time into other people's lives. So you can kind of see who the stranger is going to be as well. Gotta leave some surprises, so I'll leave it at that for the moment.
And it would be invisible to someone who wasn't aware of the Bible, and it'd be clear to someone who was?
Boy, yeah, I thought the first book would have been clear to everybody. Then I got some feedback and discovered it wasn't. But to most people who have at least a little bit of a church background, at least some of it would be obvious. Whereas in the second book, I think an unchurched person might be a little bit more likely to miss it because it's not direct. If people are familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia and Aslan the Lion is supposed to be Jesus, the first book is kind of that, this equals this. But the second book, like I said, is a little bit, there are connections, but they're a little vaguer, so I can be a little more general with my storytelling.
Can you talk about why you chose to do it that way?
Because not everybody likes the direct allegory. Some people really enjoy it, and that's why Narnia is very popular, and some people find it a little too much, a little too over the top, that everything has to equal something
When we
else.
talk about the first book, why did you choose to?
Oh, why did I do it the first time? Uh, Partially because I really enjoy C.S. Lewis's writing, both the fiction stuff like Narnia and the nonfiction stuff like The Great Divorce or Mere Christianity. But also because it was early in the baseball part of the storyline that I had a team with 12 players, and I kind of started to see some of the symbolism coming out before I was consciously trying to put it there. So I thought, at the time I thought I might only be writing one book anyway, so I thought if I want to do the baseball story and I want to do the allegorical story, if I can see a way to do them both in this first book, I'm going to do that. Because when I was first writing the first book, I didn't know there would be another opportunity. If this went south, I might just decide, go back strictly to writing journalism and never get back to it. He was first.
Publishing. Are you working with a publishing house? Are you self-published? How are you doing it?
I'm self-published through Amazon.
Okay.
Amazon provides all the means that I need to do it. And just to make a note of it, there's three types of publishing in general. There's signing with a company, and they give you the deadline, and they give you a monetary advance, but the monetary advance isn't for you to buy a boat with. It's to go buy promotional opportunities to go out and get your book out there. There's self-publishing, which is what I do, where you write your whole manuscript, you get in as good a shape as you can, and Amazon publishes it for you, but they do very, very little promoting for you. Then there's also something called vanity publishing. That's not good stuff. Amazon wants me to succeed because they make money off of me selling the book. They don't make any money off of me just publishing it. Vanity publishers, you could send them complete, utter nonsense. They made their money off of you paying them to print it. So while the other two paths usually get you some quality of writing, the vanity publishing could go anywhere. And a frustration for myself and my writing buddy, who are both self-published through Amazon, sometimes people think we're vanity published, and there wasn't any editing or any of that going into it. It takes me 8 months to write a manuscript. It takes us 16 months to go through all the editing on it. We weren't going to put it through a vanity publisher after that. Speaking of my writing buddy, I did want to point out, a woman named Laura Campbell, who goes to my church, she's published 3 books of her own. She writes about a different subject than me, but both of these covers were designed by my writing buddy. I am not a designer, I'm a writer. She's both. So I wanted to give her a little shout out for that.
I don't know what's Legion and Twilight Baseball?
Okay, Legion Baseball, the American Legion Post sponsor various local summer teams in their own leagues. There aren't many teams in Lancaster County anymore, but Ephrata, who won the state championship a couple of years ago, they still have a team. Up in Lebanon County, we've got Campbelltown, we've got Richland, Myerstown, the Lebanon City team, and about 3 others. So the local American Legion Post just sponsor teams, and they sometimes play on independent fields, sometimes they borrow the fields that the high schools have, and they play 20 regular season games, and they have a county tournament, a regional tournament, a state tournament, and a national tournament.
And that's high school age.
That's 16 through 19, so some college freshmen plays as well. And then Twilight kind of faded over the last few years, but that's sort of the working man's league, that when you got home from work a couple nights a week, you get together and play. There used to be a team in Lidditz I've had to cover a few times, and those would not have the national tournaments. Those would be like the Lebanon and Lancaster teams would have their own league, and there'd be a West Shore league for the Cumberland and York teams and things like that.
Your county still have a strong Twilight League, Central League, Susquehanna League? They
I'm not sure. Ever since I became a freelancer, I haven't been sent to any Twilight events, so I'm not sure.
They had a very strong league. In fact, hosted a tournament over Labor Day that brought in teams from 7 different states, and the final game was played in Mount Wolf and would have close to 10,000 people at the
Mhm.
league. It's pretty amazing.
That's Twilight.
Yeah.
How old are they? Are they,
Twilight can be any age.
okay.
But
Yeah.
my story is more focused on, I don't use the term legion, but it's more set up like that. So the people you're reading about are between 16 and 19 years of age on this team. But you also follow some of the adults that are around them too. So you see all the ages represented.
And that's how you get to Virginia, because that's where that final game is, right? The championship games are in.
No.
No?
You'll have to buy the book too.
All right, but the Legion is what I'm referring to.
The Legion's championship game is in North Carolina, actually.
Oh, okay.
Now he's curious.
So when you're writing, what's your day like? How many hours a day do you write?
Well, when I wrote the first book was when I started homeschooling my son, who was no longer hourly employed. So that actually, though homeschooling was certainly busy, it gave me a block of my day that I could write. And so a lot of times I was writing from 4 to 6 every evening, after we had finished homeschool, but before it was dinner time. And for most of the first book, that was when I did my writing, that's when I did my editing, that's when I started getting my promotional materials ready when the book was about to come out. The second book started off similarly, but as you may recall, things got a little different in 2020 and 2021. With the pandemic and being shut in, didn't have as much to do. My son stopped being homeschooled and started doing cyber school. So you would think that I had the benefit of more time, which I did. I could write whenever I wanted, could write for several hours sometime if I wanted to. Same with the editing. But something that happens with writers, we're quite the nervous bunch. We also have a lot of time to overthink what we're doing. So while I was spending more time writing, I was also spending more time worrying, which sometimes can be a good thing. It can make you think an extra 1 or 2 times how you want to handle this scene or how to develop this character. And other times, you've got something that's exactly the way you want it, and you're still questioning it for another week or 2 after you've gotten it together. But overall, I tried to write in blocks with the first book, and then the second book, I just tried to make the best out of a bad situation over pandemic and shutdown as I put that one together.
2 questions. One is like, in 2 hours, how many pages would you write? And secondly, do you have a plan from the beginning to end before you start writing, or is it organic, it just goes, or how do you figure that out?
I'll answer the second question first. The planning for the first book, a lot of the planning took place while I was driving from my home to Boyertown, and the story was just sort of playing out in my head. But with the second book,
You can write it down like a note.
not for quite a while. Now the second book and third book, I have written down outlines for, and to at least get, not as exactly detailed, I know what's going to happen on every page, but enough that I know a few things that'll happen in each chapter. I know that before I start actually writing them out. For if I sit down and write for 2 hours, if I'm sitting down and actually writing something I already have planned out, I'll probably write, I don't know how many pages it works out to, but between 1,000 and 2,500 words. Whereas if I'm writing a scene, but it's one of those scenes that I'm still a little dim on how I'm going to go through it, it may only be 250 words. But when I get going on writing a manuscript, I just feel it's important to write something every day. I've had days where I only wrote 100 words. But as long as I pushed forward, I was okay. And that's another nice thing about being a self-published author as opposed to having a contract with somebody. If I want to give myself an extra couple weeks or a month to get it ready, because a couple ideas are coming slowly, I've got that time. Nobody's giving me a specific deadline. It's a little bit of a relief after 17 years of having a 10:15 or 11:15 deadline every single night. I can set my own deadlines this way. Yes?
So you edit your own stuff? You don't have somebody else edit it for you?
I have both. When I read it, when I write it, I read over it once and then I do a second draft and I read over it again. After that point, I have, at the very least, my mother, and then 2 or 3 what we call advanced readers who read the story as it is at that point and then return their feedback to me. Sometimes for the purpose of spelling and grammar, but a lot of times for story flow and is this point clear enough? Is this point a little too vague? Is it your intent to keep this mysterious? And whether you did or not. So I have, at minimum, 3 other sets of eyes looking at it, plus 3 computer programs that are editing programs that look over it as well.
I'm amazed, because I read a lot, and I don't read all those self-help books, guys, sorry, I read junk.
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
What Glenn meant to say was.
So, but it amazes me when I'm reading, I think, I can't believe that's wrong, or there's 2 those, and that stuff drives
And
me
yes, it does
crazy.
still get, just to give you an example, I'm reading, and I mentioned over here earlier, we've had 6 Charles Dickens books in our house since we got married, 16 years ago. And we've never read them. And I thought, this was yours, fine, I'm gonna read them. And I've read 5 of them, midway through the 6th one. And I don't know how many times this Dickens work has been, republished and which printing of this is, but, it's Charles Dickens, that's been around 180 years. I'm finding mistakes in his stuff. I find things that are still getting through. And I realize he was writing with, pen on sort. But you would think that the publishers over time would have caught some of these things, and they don't. Some of these things still get through. So, in some ways, it makes me feel better. In some ways, it makes me feel worse. But errors are part of life.
It always drives me crazy, so.
It's kind of interesting, the 3 type of publishing that you mentioned. So in the self-publishing through Amazon, is there a quality control? Like a vanity type person doing a book couldn't go through Amazon because their stuff would be garbage.
If they didn't take the time to do at least a certain degree of editing on it, and also making sure the formatting for it is all right. That's another thing that Amazon doesn't want a book that's published through them with, suddenly this paragraph's over in the margin and something's going off the page, and like the cover Laura gave me, like if the cover were like off center or something, they won't publish it then. They say you go back and you fix it. Whereas with a vanity publisher, hey, you're the one who paid to look that way, so yeah, they won't care.
So to Amazon, you send them the manuscript and they produce that, or do you produce that and then they sell it and then you ship it?
No, I send them the manuscript, they put it in that form, and it is available on their website, but is also available wherever I go for events like this.
And so you buy those from them?
Yes. But they still don't really come out ahead until people start actually buying it. But they don't lose either.
The house never loses.
Yes.
Okay, question. What does the book retail for?
$10.
Okay, why did you come up with that price?
I wanted to keep it as available as possible to people. It's more important to me Amazon sets a minimum price on you, and the minimum price is not that much lower than 10. So I just wanted to keep it available to people because I thought I would like somebody who's either never been to church or has been to church but doesn't quite get it, but they do get baseball or they do get romance stories. to read these stories and go, oh, that's what that story's about. That's what that message is about. That's why that person I hear about in the Bible is doing fill in the blank. I didn't understand what they were doing 2,000 years ago in Palestine, but I understand what the third baseman on this baseball team is doing. I understand what the newlywed wife is trying to do. I'm hoping that they can get it that way, but if they're going to get it that way, I also don't want somebody to look at that and go, I've seen people who do the self-publishing thing who also are like not famous or anything, try to sell a book at this size for $25. That's gonna make people turn away. And I'm willing to cut into my own profit margin just to get the message out.
That's my next question. What is your profit margin?
Not much.
Next question, timeline. Do you keep a timeline as to how your story's progressing? And do you have like, I have a posted, when I write, I have a posted collage of my different characters, a description of, physical description of them, a kind of like a mental mindset of what, where they've come from, that sort of thing, which allows me to figure out how they interact with, person 14, that sort of thing. Do you keep that in mind, or is all that in your head?
When I outline the storyline, I sort of keep track of that. Like I keep going back and forth, like is this event taking place at the right amount of time since the time we referred to it earlier, or when we talk about it later. As far as descriptions of characters, I've taken the approach of I really only describe the characters from the neck up and maybe how tall they are. And I allow the reader to imagine the rest. There's a few reasons why I do that. Don't necessarily want to get into all of them now, but there's a point in the first book where one guy sees a young woman and thinks she is the most beautiful young woman in the world. Just wowed at first sight. I'm going to let the reader picture what that person looks like then. I'm not going to give that description to them. I'm going to leave the reader the ability to decide what is this young woman that the young man is really interested in, and let them decide how that person would appear.
So, have you always wanted to do this? Like, what did you want to do when you were young? And are you doing this full time now? This is your income, that's it?
Oh, no, this is not my full-time thing. Well, I'm still a freelancer for the newspapers. The last thing I covered was the state basketball championships in Hershey for the Pittsburgh Tribune. I also do online ESL teaching. Been doing that for 3 years now, 3.5 years, something like that. Those would be the things that I do more frequently and also provide more income, which just falls off of what I just said about not charging too much for the book. Is this what I wanted to do? I'm not even sure I remember what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I kind of fell into journalism just because the Patriot News had an opening right at the same time I was graduating college. So it happened more to me than me chasing it. The idea of writing this book, like I said, came mostly out of some story ideas that I was coming up with while I was at the Patriot, but never had the times or means to pursue as a journalism project. And then I rerouted into a fiction project. Yes?
Do you have a lot of research you have to do to make sure, like, scenes are accurate wherever it's located or stuff like that?
Not much for the baseball one, because I covered so much baseball, I was already familiar with it. I knew how the tournaments worked, where the fields were, the sort of the atmosphere that's around a Legion or high school game that's not the same as a major league game or a minor league game. That one I didn't have to do as much on. The Jewelry of Grace I had to do a little bit more on for the nature of the jewels that they are searching for. And a couple other aspects, again, can't give anything away, but there was a little bit more research to the second one, and I am going to have to do some more research as I progress in the third manuscript. Well, as I said earlier, they're $10 a piece. I sign them for free, so I'll be able to hang out here for anybody who would like to pick up either or both of the stories. Thank you.